why does femme space matter? Why am I making an argument that we need to think about femmes in separation and distinctly? Why do femmes need to be thought? So hopefully that will become clear, and it won't just be me having an angry, it'll be an anger, but well-reasoned with lots of theory discussion as to why femme space matters, and it's important. And then I'm going to give a couple of examples of femme space, though for the purposes of this talk I am actually focusing on the London UK ones of Bird Club and the Queer Femme Coterie, partly due to time restrictions, but also because that's sort of more the scene that I know and where I live. But there are examples of femme space across the world. So there's the Femme Mafia that has branches all through the US and some in Canada, and now quite a branch going in Sydney in Australia. And then we also have the Femme Conference, which is every other year. And so that's kind of now becoming a global thing. And then later this summer there's actually going to be a Femme Conference in Italy. So that's going to be the first one happening in Europe. So I don't know if anyone's going. Unfortunately I can't because I'm doing another work thing somewhere else. But methodology, let's begin. Mixed methods. Now this is a little departure from my background, as I'm based usually in, I did an undergrad in English Lit, then via gender and sexuality studies. I tend to think about film quite a lot. I also engage quite a lot with digital humanities and the internet. But I've done two main research methods for this project. One, informal interviews, which have taken the place via Facebook discussions on Facebook chat, where friends have very kindly agreed to let me interview them for hours on end about what femme means to them, how they use femme, and how they negotiate that with various genderqueer and trans identities. Then we've also thought about this has been in conversation with friends and other members of femme groups. And then the performer Bird Bird, who ran Bird Club, which I'm going to talk about in a little while, she actually very kindly agreed to send me some background information on why she started Bird Club. And then the other day gave me a 45-minute pep talk phone call about why I should do this research on femme and why it's important that we have femme space at a genderqueer conference. So that was kind of a, like both sort of a femme solidarity moment, but also getting lots of interesting insights. Now the other part, which is more to do with my media studies, what I'm doing with that, is thinking of using digital humanities. So this is thinking about how I've been using the internet both as research method, as in a subject to something to analyse, but also as a way that I'm actually engaging with my participants. So what I've done is, as you will have noticed from this morning's on the live feed, I use Twitter quite a lot. So I started off using Twitter and the hashtag #femme to ask people across the world, how do they define as femme? What does the term femme mean for them? And so I thought this would be a way to get opinions both from people I knew, but also hopefully some opinion from people that I didn't know, and trying to expand the reach of the research in that sort of snowball effect way. Best that I can, obviously, on short notice, so I've done my best. So this has all been done just for this paper. And then other ways has been reading and engaging with various blogs, Facebook group for queer femmes in London, looking at some Tumblrs, and then also obviously the traditional cultural studies research of using books. I do actually do that. I have a tendency, of people that know, I've kind of been sort of collating my femme library, which I have like little piles of books of different projects I'm doing around my living room. So that's been the other method. It's been analysing text. Right. So, first of all, how am I using queer in this? I'm actually harking back to quite an old definition of queer that's developed by Eve Kosofsky-Cedric in '94, because I think it's quite useful for thinking through the multiplicity of femme. She argues that queer is, and I quote, the open mesh of possibilities, gaps, overlaps, dissonances and resonances, lapses and excesses of meaning when they constitute constituent elements of anyone's gender, of anyone's sexuality, aren't made, or can't be made, to signify monolithically. Now, why do I think that's so important for what we're doing here? Is I don't want to close down femme as an individual meaning. I don't want to say that femmes are only sort of a hyper-feminine, performative version, like I'm wearing, obviously today I'm wearing a tiara to give this paper. So I don't want to say that. I want to say that femmes can come in all sorts of shapes, sizes, abilities, colours, races, nationalities, and across the world. So that's one of the things that to me is both politically and academically really important. And so I wanted to kind of foreground that in terms of my research, because I'm very aware that queer theory and queer studies as a discipline has actually become just that. It has started to become disciplined, I would argue, and I'm seeing some nods in agreement here, which is nice to me. And so I wanted to think about how can we maybe resist that, and how can we learn from our activist communities that some of us are also engaged in, and preserve that difference. So with that, what is Femme? Alright, so I'm going to give two. First of all, has anyone read the Feminist Manifesto? Okay, no. The Feminist Manifesto was written actually in '96, and it got republished in a book called Brazen Femme. But Lisa Duggan and Kathleen McHugh here argue that for Femme is not an identity, not a history, not a location on the map of desire. The Femme body is an anti-identity body, a queer body in feminine drag. So there's quite a lot that we can think about here in terms of how might Femme relate to the questions of genderqueer. So this is something that I don't have any fixed answers. As my students find me incredibly annoying, I tend to kind of want to ask questions and get people to think about how these might work. So an example could be, do we signify a femme in terms of their visibility? Are you easily seen as femme if you have long hair? Is it to do with makeup? Is it to do with certain queerness? Which again I think comes to a bigger question of how do we signify gender and sexuality visibly? How do we get that recognition? What does that mean? So that's that sort of idea of like the idea of like having your hair cut, because I used to have like very long sort of Becky Page style hair down to here. And when I did, I would generally never get read as queer. Since I cut my hair into a short asymmetric haircut, like seriously, everyone is like, oh yeah, of course she is. Right, so that is also a very real lived example, but also that's then supported by an essay on gender fucking on the femme side of the spectrum that's in the book Nobody Passes, where they talk about a similar idea. So one of the other ones is a definition from the Femme Conference. So this was also, I thought, bringing a nice nod to where we are now. Queer femme is a transgressive, genderqueer, standalone, and, important right here, empowered identity. Okay, so as you will notice, one thing I'm doing is I'm not trying to erase the history of femme butch and femme, and how they often go together. But I want to think about femme on their own. I want to think about why femmes don't necessarily need to be seen relationally, but seen independently. Because femininity is strong, but I will get to that bit shortly about why I think femininity is amazing. Okay, so just some other definitions, but we're going to talk through and come back to that harking of some of that research I was doing through Twitter. So in the last few weeks, I've been every so often asking questions of, what is queer? What does femme mean to you? What about trans and femme? How do you relate these? How do you connect these identities? What do you think? And I can tell you, I've been getting kind of quite a lot of angry comments sent to me, as well as some nice ones. But here is a choice sample of people that agreed. So first of all, we have the classic, more traditional option, that femme refers to a lesbian or bi woman who dresses in a conventionally feminine way. Now I'm seeing some kind of scowls at that one. Now I think we're not, that's perhaps not, as you maybe kind of can tell by my attire, the angle I want to focus on. Because I'm wanting to actually divorce femme from cisgendered women. And I think that's a very important thing to say. And I think I don't think femme needs to actually be attached to your biological gender identity at all. Because otherwise, how would there be room for the fabulous trans femme princesses in my life? Alright, so we have another example, which I thought this is kind of getting a little bit different idea. Am I being too simplistic if I suggest that femme is a conscious, possibly critical engagement with femininity? Now, an advantage of this one is it does mean it doesn't matter, it's not so much about who you're fucking, but it's more about what's your relationship with femininity. So can you maybe be a femme if, say, you might have read about queer theory? You might have been, one of those that's done lots of their English lit and been drowning in Butler, and then sort of thinking about the performativity of gender. Is that maybe how you think about femme? So then we've got another one, which this was the kind of professionalised view of it, which was, I define femme as embracing a style traditionally viewed as feminine without all the baggage attached to it. Or as this person also said, femme is femininity without the patriarchal bullshit. Which is the version I like more, but we thought this one kind of sounded more academic. But this again, how do you divorce femininity and femme from patriarchy? Can you? If we live in a patriarchal society. Is it possible? Is it possible through ideas of subversion and transgression? What do we do with them? So I don't know how we're going to answer that question, but something I want us to think about. Now the next one is by next two by people here. So we have femme friends for whom it's drag. So we're seeing femme as a very deliberate, conscious performativity here. And for others for whom it's just me. Now I think that is important, while I am arguing about femme as a performative gender identity, for others it is almost a sort of naturalised space. So we might want to think about what is that relationship between the natural and performance. And can performativity, as I went to a talk last week that gave me quite a lot of thoughts by Bev Skeggs, and can performativity become its own form of discipline? Can we actually end up trapped where we think we have to perform to a certain level to be feminine and have that femme visibility? And then another one which, until fairly recently, I'd not thought about as what is femme, is, yes, for me femme space is personal, and femme identity is personal. I can only speak for myself. I think femme is a trans identity that queers femininity. So in this sense, because this is an idea that I hadn't thought about, though some people were making me aware that I should make sure I watch the Female to Femme documentary, which talks about this. She's thinking about if you think of trans in a bigger umbrella setting, and if you think of femme as a deliberate choice that's separate from your, say, chosen gender, and you're choosing to be femme, how is that maybe different? What does that maybe do with gender? What does that do with spaces? Alright, so I know I'm throwing you so many questions here, and lots to think about, which I hope is a good thing. Alright. Okay. Banana munch. Okay. Next, I want to think about a really important history of femme is its relationship with multiplicities. Femme, as I said, is not a singular identity, and it shouldn't be. We shouldn't think of it that way. Instead, femme theory and femme thinking tends to be led by those people and femmes that live under multiple oppressions and inequalities. So it tends to be, for example, class. We have a lot of working class femmes. There is a whole movement within femme called hard femmes. There are the ideas that's done by, say, a zine that a friend of mine put out called Hard Femme by Kirsty Fife. And in that she's exploring how does femme and hard femme relate to a failure of femininity. What if I'm femme, but I have a habit of falling over all the time, and I like to kind of, wear ripped jeans, but does that mean I can't be femme? So this is, again, different thought thinking. Kind of also ties in with biker culture, is how I like to think of the hard femmes. Then we have race. So I don't know if any of you have read the Femme Shark Manifesto, which I am going to be talking about shortly. That's going to be our next point that we're going to go to. But the Femme Sharp Manifesto is emphasising how femmes come in all shapes, all colours, and all creeds, and all abilities, as in physical, mental health, all those different sizes and styles. So I'm going to give us a quote from that, because I think it's a really important foundational piece in terms of femme thinking. And then another one which for me was very influential in terms of my thinking about femme, in terms of thinking critically about bodies and different kinds of embodiment, was thinking about femme and its relationship with fat. So if we have, I'm seeing again nods, so 9. So we're having queer fat femmes. So some of you might know the work of Bevan Branlandegum, which I might not have said that correct, who has a blog called Queer Fat Femme. And on this, Bevan, one of the things she likes to do is think about, so I'm fat, right? And if you're fat, that means that you're often seen as asexual. You're seen as this space that's both hypersexualized, yet also not having sexual desire. Then how does that connect with queer communities, which can have habits of certain body controlling policing? And so then we're thinking about our relationships with those. So that's another space, is queer fat femme. So, I'm kind of keeping now in silence. Alright, Femme Sharp Manifesto. So then I can get us to our femme space and why I think femme space is really important. So, this is written by Leah. I'm not going to say her whole name because I can't pronounce it all. Can anyone actually pronounce her whole name? Okay, right. Leah wrote this amazing piece which you can find on her MySpace blog. Yeah, people still use MySpace blogs, I was surprised. Called the Femme Sharp Manifesto. And it was only written in 2008, but in femme circles this has become an incredibly influential piece of writing. It's become a piece, it's like a poem to think about femme inclusivity, power, and why people need to think critically about intersectionality, which, as I'm sure many of you are aware, if you follow any kind of feminist debates at the moment, that's kind of the hot topic of critique as to why all feminists aren't intersectional. I don't know. Okay, Femme Sharks. Femme Shark Manifesto. Femme Sharks recognise that femmes come in all kinds of sizes, and each kind is luscious. We work towards loving our curvy, fat, skinny, supersized, thick, disabled, black and brown, fine-ass bodies every day. We realise that loving ourselves in a racist, sexist, homophobic, transphobic, ableist, classist system is an everyday act of war against that system. Just leave that for a second. Now I think that manifesto, while it is about femme, I think it's probably quite useful for this Genderqueer conference about what is trying to happen here. As this conference to me, thank you both Lindsay and Ruth, seems to be trying to create a space to think through gender and queering gender identities critically.
Oh, the slash.
Yeah. Yeah, I know, it's just, there's the whole second extra big part. The double barrel section. Leah Lash. So, well done, and thank you for writing this. So, just briefly, and I think this should have become clear, we're going to say, why does femme space matter? So, put our 3 points up. First of all, as many of you will probably be aware, while we live in certain able-bodied cisgender society that, privileges masculinity as norm, these reproduction of norms and inequalities in terms of mental health, in terms of abilities, are often reproduced within queer circles. Femininity is not, generally speaking, a privileged identity to hold. Indeed, misogyny and sexism is something that is part of many people's everyday lived experience, as the Twitter feed Everyday Sexism thinks about. Misogyny Julia Serrano in Whipping Girl, which I found quite useful for thinking about Femme, even though that's talking about trans femininity, describes as the tendency to dismiss and deride femaleness and femininity as being something that is seen as less. So if you think we're coming from these intersectionalities, but from a position of less, that is the starting point. So these intersectionalities really do matter. We need to think about assumptions that femininity can be challenging. We want to think about making femininity powerful. So for example, how does this tie in with masculine privilege, and where am I going with this? So, as we've heard today, you can have a queer obsession with inversion. So what I mean by this is, if we think back to those, I think it sort of was Hell's talk and some of the earlier talks we had today, thinking about how it's often those that are seen as being visibly opposite to their biological gender that can get represented more easily as queer. Which again ties into a question of, how do you represent sexuality? How do you be visible? And how do you be visible in a way that people can recognise? And is this something that people want? So, what I would say, and I think this is something that Siri Jarrell Johnson put very clearly in her piece, Femme Privilege Does Not Exist, that was put on Tumblr earlier this year. It's not enough to think about queer femmes as, well, yeah, but they can pass as straight. I mean, that's kind of the point, is, well, they're not straight. And what does it mean anyway to be passing as straight? What is the assumption that within every woman every queer woman is a straight woman secretly? So, this has led to feelings of anger from lots of queer femmes who've been experiencing repeated examples of erasure. For example, biphobia, told that they're not queer enough. Do they really look queer enough? Are you sure you're actually that queer? Like, I mean, you just look like a bit girl. Alright, and then also, simultaneously, you have those that are failing at femininity. So, it's like, well, am I femme enough to be thought of as femme? I mean, that's another question people ask. So again, we're seeing failure as something that I think is important, that is something that we want to come to. And so it's from these reasons about failure, erasure, and invisibility that we've led to the creation of the two Femme spaces. I'm going to just show you some pictures of and talk you through very briefly before we finish. So first of all, Bird Club. Did anyone go to Bird Club? I mean, I wasn't fortunate enough to do so. Now, Bird Club ran in London, UK. These are some pictures of Bird La Bird in her various performances, including pretending to be a priest, and then just getting angry in general. So Bird Club decided to start the event with her friend Maria Rosa Young in 2006, because she was fed up with only seeing femmes in the sideline of queer culture in relation to being with butchers, or not even existing at all. So instead, she wanted, and this is a quote from when we talked the other day, she wanted to create a space where femmes were literally the centre of the stage. So femmes were taking over, and they were going to be the focus. And know that femmes could come to this club and not be assumed to be straight just because they look feminine, just because they performed femininity, because of how they appeared. Then, in 2007, the London Lesbian and Gay Film Festival actually ran a strand of the festival on femmes, which I would have loved to have been at that one, but sadly I lived in Edinburgh then. So this organising, for her, she considers herself principally a performer, not an organiser. But she did it because she was frustrated at the lack of space and wanted to showcase queer feminist femininity, her own work, and bring femmes together. Unfortunately, there hasn't been a Bird Club since 2009 because the event started to become so popular that she became angry that she couldn't find a place in London that was wheelchair accessible, because that would then otherwise be furthering other privileges and like replicating inequalities, and she didn't want to be involved with that. So we then had a drought of femme space Until earlier this year, where Militant Barbie, who I'm time sharing the tiara from right now, and some friends of mine, started the Queer Femme Coterie. So this is, so far we've had only like a couple of meetings, so it's very small, very early days. So I'm kind of, but this is our Facebook group manifesto, and we're going to finish with the manifesto that Militant Barbie and I wrote yesterday. Okay. So the Queer Femme Coterie is a group for self-defining queer femmes to discuss and organise. All genders and none, so you might be agender, are welcome as long as they identify as queer femme. The group is intended to be a safe space for femmes, and no discriminatory language of any kind will be tolerated. And I think because we're very aware of our sort of history of femme and where we've come from, that's been something incredibly important that we've preserved in the group. And also we're both very aware of our appearance of white femininity. So, our conclusion, my conclusion of this talk, is the Femme-led Space Manifesto, which I hadn't really intended on writing manifestos today, but this is kind of what we're thinking. This is our short points. As femmes, we want our own voice to be heard. Femmes want the ability to speak for themselves. We don't want to be spoken for by people that are others, which has happened at maybe certain major recent events. Not saying names. We want to be heard in our own rights. Femmes actually do have a voice, and they have a voice in queer communities. And it's nice to actually get that recognised, so thank you very much for giving us a space here. Femmes want to self-define. That's one of the reasons that I did the Twitter questions and asked people how did they define as femme. I am very aware of my power as researcher, and with this magical DR in front of my name, that gives me certain privileges in terms of the academy and my access to where I can speak. So that's one of the reasons that I'm going to close with the acknowledgements for the femme community that's helped me put this together. Femmes want to self-organise. We want to actually be able to do this on our own terms and for our own voices. We want to take or make our own space. We don't want to be given space. But at the same time, if we ask to organise something, we actually want to organise it. Don't say, yeah, that's fine, but we'll organise it for you. But we're not femmes. It's like, no, that's kind of defeating the whole point and replicating the erasure. We don't want that. In conclusion, and so thank you, Barbie, and other femmes here. Femmes, we want femme solidarity. So this both means femmes together, visibly, but also femmes and allies. So for this, that's kind of where I'd like to end this, is we'd like femme solidarity. And with that note, I would like to close with my final slide, which is an acknowledgement of all the femmes and co that have helped me put this together and been influential to me. So thank you very much.